Circle of Brilliance. Today is a day of sharing resources. And so I was working on a project having to do with crafting about a dozen different activity lists of about a dozen activities each. So I've had to be doing a lot of research and a lot of digging around on the internet and all that. And along the way of doing that, I stumbled across a very interesting, I guess, website. At first, I saw a document and I clicked on the document, and that pulled me into this website. And next thing you know is I'm downloading all kinds of stuff. So I'm going to slide something into the screen that you guys may actually already be fully aware of. But how many of you are familiar with the schoolofthought.org?
No,
Anybody? No, 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 no. Well,
that out to the UK.
no, I actually think it's in the US. I think it's in Pennsylvania. Um,
Okay.
and it's got, at first I'm going like, well, it's just yet another one of us out there trying to find our place in the world of commenting on growth and development and all that. Well, you scroll through this and you go like, oh no, they're in a totally different league. So the purpose of the school of thought is to help us question all schools of thought.
Mm.
Right there, I had to go like, well, I'll scroll. And so I started scrolling through, and then I saw this building. I don't think that building actually exists. If it does, they've got some serious leak problems in these two gullies. Uh, but when you take a bigger look at the picture, it's got these words scattered all around it. So I think, and that second logo that looks like the wreath and all that, these I think are all just applied Photoshop. But they've been around for a while. They've reached over 30 million people in 7 languages. Creative Commons. Now, I think I've heard about Creative Commons in the past, but anyway, I'm not going to drag you through all this, but it's really interesting what they do, blah, blah, blah. And they have these downloadable resources that I'm going to share with you guys the PDF files of the ones we're talking about. But I'm going to encourage you, and you can keep scrolling. This goes on for many feet. So, scroll till your heart's content. But up here at the top of you, just go to schoolofthought.org, schoolofthought.org. One of their little links says downloads. And if you click on downloads, you can download all our resources for free under Creative Commons. And all you do is give your name and your email. I promise you, they've not in any way tried to sell me anything at all. They're just really, oh, it already did that, apparently. Anyway, once you give them your address, they're going to send you a link to what has to be a good, I'm going to say half a gig of materials.
Hmm.
So some really astounding posters that are also available, print out single sheets. They do sell these things as decks of cards, and they do charge for that. So they are trying to do some fundraising. But this is really, I think, a really cool group of pretty darn noble people who are just trying to do something, to help whoever they can help. So anyway, that's my pitch for them, schoolofthought.org. I'll drag that out of the way. And then I'm going to show you the first of a few different resources that are in that pile. Can't go through all of them. There's at least, I think there's a couple of dozen of them. But the one thing they have is about biases. And I'm going to show you this one first because we did talk about it beforehand. I'm going to chat it over to everybody. And you're welcome to open that up if you want, just so you can see it locally. But, oh, I guess I need to open it myself now, don't I? Just a second. Open it up. Drag it over here. You guys can see it. So these are the biases. Now we've talked a bit about biases, cognitive biases, but this is 24 of them. I don't really know how many there are, but I thought that you might get a kick out of some of this. Thou shalt not suffer cognitive biases. Cognitive biases make our judgments irrational. We have evolved to use shortcuts in our thinking, which are often useful. But a cognitive bias means there's a kind of misfiring going on, causing us to lose objectivity. This poster has been designed to help you identify some of the most common biases and how to avoid falling victim to them. help people become aware of their biases, generally by sharing the website yourbias.is, which is a project of this website, or more specifically, your bias is slash, oh, is is, your bias is confirmation bias. And you can also download the poster and all that. So they're being very generous. They're giving this stuff away. And you know, that's got to bring a smile to everybody. And I'm glad they're doing it because it's always been my way of operating whenever I can. I'm glad to see I'm not a fool. Someone else is actually doing it. We could be fools together, but there you go. Anywho, I'm going to distribute it one more time, and then I wanted to bring up just a couple of the biases that are listed here. Okay, so I just chatted over to for any newcomers. So anyone have any initial response, reaction they want to share with cognitive bias?
I've heard of a bunch of these, but there are some new ones in there.
There are.
Yeah.
Now, by the way, what I sent you was the poster size. This is 3 feet by 2 feet if you really print it out at full size. If you do ask for the downloads, you can also what can I say? Get something that's more like at the handout side. I just don't think it's all that readable. Chat did not show up. Did you guys get a download poster PDF file?
No.
No.
You didn't. Well, is that rude or what? Because it says I sent it to you twice. Okay, then let's see if we can do this. All y'all just relax for a minute.
There's an actual codex of I think Stanford or someone did a codex of biases, and there's over 140
that they've
known
identified.
biases.
Wowza.
Yeah, I think we looked at that one time because they put it into like this model that someone had studied, and they said these are just the ones that were identified.
Very interesting. Oh,
and I've seen a list of over 200.
Yeah, yeah,
wow.
exactly.
Yeah.
I'm going to forward the email to all of you, but while I'm doing that, I just got one from them. This is the only thing I've received. And this is, you know, thanking me for the downloads. And here's another one, the best free edu things on the internet. And there's like all kinds of courses and platforms, all sorts of physical things that it's really interesting. So far, I'm very happy with the way they're reaching out to the world. Okay, with that said, all y'all just chat amongst yourself for a second. I've got to find the original email so I can forward it to all of you. Okay. All right. Brian is in Florida right now. Chat amongst yourselves.
Has anybody ever heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect?
No.
No.
It's interesting that let me zoom in on that one. Yeah. The more you know, the less confident you're likely to be because experts know just how much they don't know. They tend to underestimate their ability. It's easy to be overconfident when you have only a simple idea of how things are. Yeah. The whole problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are so certain of themselves, yet wiser people are so full of doubts. Well, Bertrand Russell, thank you for that. Okay, chat. I'm still looking for this email so I can just send it to you guys. Well, you guys are.
Brian, how's the weather in Florida?
It's about what, 20 Celsius, so 70 something degrees.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah, it's not bad. I think the storm still like changed the weather pattern a little bit because it's quite like cloudy.
Oh, uh-huh.
But it's, you
Where
know,
are you? Where are you, Brian? Though it really matters, you know. Where
I'm in Venice.
Oh, all right. Okay, on the West Coast.
Yeah, so down south from where my house is. My sister has a vacation home here. My house is in horse country, so it's in Central Florida. more close to Orlando, like directly in the middle of the state. You can go an hour north, Jacksonville, hour south, you're in Orlando, hour southwest, you're in Tampa. So we're literally in the middle of the state.
Okay.
But my sister house got a little flooded, not just a little bit, you know, where it's soggy floors and stuff like that. And
Terrible.
I just don't know what they're going to do about this insurance.
Yeah,
You
we
know,
were talking to someone about that, and apparently it's a very big deal based on did the water come up from below or did it come from above? And if you don't have the came from below insurance, flood insurance, then you're kind of well, you're messed up.
Plus,
Um,
the state is fighting on it because
yeah, they
the
should.
State Farm was
Yeah.
the only one that was doing it. At one point, they pulled out because there was just too many hurricanes, and so now Republicans and Democrats are fighting about who didn't reconcile the issues
Yeah, well,
because
good
it's
luck
a
with that.
state
In the
sponsor.
meantime, she's got carpets that need to be dried out at the very least, not
Exactly.
ripped out
I actually have a lot of contacts in the insurance industry, and most of them don't want to write in Florida anymore.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. Okay,
Yeah.
everybody, I've now emailed the link to the downloadable file folder. I think it's a zip file, so you still have to unzip it. But in there is all of these resources that I thought you would find. In fact, I'll just slide. What on earth is happening today? Let me just slide this over here, and you can see what's going on. So there are 3 file folders, I think, in that particular link. So the instructions, it's a very nice PowerPoint presentation, I think, that tells you what they're trying to do and encouraging you to share things, et cetera, et cetera. In the second folder are all the resources. So there's a couple of poster sizes for the fallacies, the biases, the rules of civil conversation, critical thinking, creative thinking, and then these learning lists kind of thing. And then down below to share, they've got all kinds of individualized images, the videos, etc. So I think they're giving you a lot of really useful sorts and interesting things to kind of share. So
Mhm.
you've received it. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, well, then you're on your own. So, all right, now I'm going to get back to this this little chart for just a second, because it goes back to something that Brian was saying. Why do people consciously choose to live in an area that historically has been impacted by one or more natural disaster sorts of things? So I suspect that bias is going to come into play at some of them, but I haven't read these enough to kind of know that there is this belief that stuff might happen, but it's not going to happen to me. You guys, you know that one? Or is that a self-serving? No, that's not that one. Pessimism. No.
Well, there's definitely the sunk cost bias is at play there.
No, what did you call that one?
Complacency bias.
Mhm.
All right, which one again did you guys say?
The sunk cost bias.
Sunk cost.
Sunk cost bias. Is that what
Or
it is?
fallacy, the sunk cost fallacy. It's up there on the left-hand corner.
Oh, there it is.
Right.
Sunk cost. Yeah. You irrationally cling to things that have already cost you something. Okay, that's interesting. When we invested our time, money, or emotion into something, it hurts us to let it go. This aversion to pain can distort our better judgment and cause us to make unwise investments. So their little coaching advice: to regain objectivity, ask yourself, had I not already invested something, would I still do so now? And what would I counsel a friend to do if they were in the same situation? Yep. So I do think there's probably a sunk cost kind of thing. You already paid for it, you might as well do it. But what is
And
this one?
also my family has lived here for generations. I'm not moving.
Yep.
Oh yeah, and that was also another one of these that was listed again. So what I wanted to do today was just kind of like give you guys these things, take a look at them. And I thought maybe we should take a deeper look at them, give it to you guys as just a little bit of quick homework to say, well, rather than make everybody go through one by one, reading the descriptions of 24 different biases, which I'd be also happy to do, but. Yeah. So yeah, it's up to you guys. All right. So anyway,
I just emailed you the cognitive biases codex.
do you know? Well, let
Yeah,
me
so
show
it's
you
a
guys some.
PDF of all of these different biases we have. They kind of categorize them from like when you think too much and different categories, but it's a pretty massive list.
All right, I'll show it to everybody in just a couple of minutes here. So, all right, so this one I've just opened up is the fallacies. So thou shalt not commit logical fallacies. I don't know why they have this kind of Plato, Socrates, Aristotle kind of graphic, but then they're quoting like 10 commandments. So anyway, whatever. A logical, yeah, I don't get it. Just like it's like mixing metaphors. So, okay. All right. Anyway, um, a logical fallacy is a flaw in reasoning. Now, this was really interesting as I read this. Strong arguments are void of logical fallacies. Whilst arguments, okay, they're definitely from the UK or somewhere, whilst arguments that are weak tend to use fallacies in place of cogent logic. Shall we soak in that for just a second? Yeah. They're like tricks or illusions of thought, and they're often very sneakily used by politicians, the media, and others to fool people. Don't be fooled. This poster has been designed to help you identify and call out dodgy logic wherever it may raise its ugly, incoherent head. I appreciate the humor that they've incorporated into this. If you see someone committing a logical fallacy online, link them to the relevant one at yourfallacyis/straw man or whatever it is. Apparently, in one of those resources that you can share, you can open up each one of these individually. So yeah, okay, anywho. So again, they've got 24 of these. And but apparently these are just the ways people who don't know what they're talking about try to make it seem like they know what they're talking about.
Hmm.
So, oh, I like this one, slippery slope. Asserting that if we allow A to happen, then Z will consequently happen too, therefore A should not happen. The problem with this reasoning is that it avoids engaging with the issue at hand and instead shifts attention to baseless extreme hypotheticals. The merits of the original argument are then tainted by unsubstantiated conjecture. So then they gives an example. Colin asserts that if we allow children to play video games, then the next thing you know, we'll be living in a post-apocalyptic zombie wasteland with no money for guardrails to protect people from slippery slopes.
Jeez.
It's too late.
Exactly.
I do believe there it is. Okay, let's see. Special pleading. Let me zoom in on this a little bit more, obviously, if I'm going to be, apparently you just clicked there. It's a miracle, everyone, a miracle. Special pleading. Moving the goalposts or making up exceptions when a claim is shown to be false. So humans are funny creatures and have a foolish aversion to being wrong. Rather than appreciate the benefits of being able to change one's mind through better understanding, many will invent ways to cling to old beliefs. Edward Johns claimed to be psychic, but when his abilities were tested under proper scientific conditions, they magically disappeared. Edward explained this, saying that one had to have faith in his abilities for them to work. All righty then. Okay, so again, we can work our way around this one by one if you guys think this would be interesting at the very least and useful.
It would be a great list to memorize for facilitators.
You know, and that's where I think these cards that they're hoping you buy, by the way, don't think they're just trying to sell you cards, because if you look at those images that you can download the artwork for both the front and the back of all the cards.
Wow.
I mean, they're giving you fully printable artwork, everything you need to just do them yourself. I think their point is that for 15 bucks and we're shipping them to you, why don't you save your paper and your effort and your hassle and your trimming and just buy the sets? In which case, I think you're absolutely right. Wouldn't it be great to use these as kind of like, what do I want to say, kind of like a developmental sort of a tool, kind of a drill sort of a thing, particularly if I was trying to train people on how to argue or persuade people powerfully, how to change people's minds, or if I was serving in the role of an advocate or a mediator, moderator, whatever it might be. Which, by the way, gets us to Tim. So, Tim, is this something that you've already seen about, seen these idea about logical fallacies?
No, I've not seen this, and I'm making note of it because a colleague was looking for something similar to this.
Yeah, yeah, really good. This is the one I find personally fascinating aboard cruise ships. So let me just zoom in. Um, Sharing something personally, I'm not a gambler. I really do understand the way that math and logic work. And while I get that some people are going to sooner or later win something that seems to make it worthwhile, I have no reason to believe that that's going to be me. So the gambler's fallacy, believing that runs occur to statistically independent phenomena such as roulette wheel spins. I've probably shared with you that I have never gambled anything at all in a casino, but I love, if I'm near one, I love to go inside of a casino and watch people play roulette, because there is no other game where so many people lose so much money so quickly.
Mm.
So I love watching roulette. And it's interesting, as you watch a roulette table, you can see they always put the last winning numbers up on kind of a display board. And as you see that it goes red, 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 you're going to watch a couple of people kind of storm the table because they want to play another red. But if it goes red, 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 they believe it's going to suddenly switch. And so they'll start walking up and betting on black or whatever it all happens to be. So I'm not close enough to actually watch anything other than the croupier, or whatever you call the person who runs a roulette wheel, grab all the chips that the house now gets to keep. But it's really interesting to just watch how people's behavior change as supposing a run is occurring, so they want to jump on it while it's young, or they think the run is going to expire, so they start to bet against it at a particular point. Both of those are mathematically silly things to do. Believing that runs occur. So this commonly believed fallacy can be said to have helped create a city in the desert of Nevada, USA. Though the overall odds of a big run happening may be low, each spin of the wheel is itself entirely independent from the last. Red had come up 6 times in a row on the roulette wheel, so Greg knew that it was close to certain that black would be up next. Suffering an economic form of natural selection with this thinking, he soon lost all of his savings.
Wow.
You gotta love it.
Brilliant.
Gotta love it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, thinking about what David was just talking about and the work that Tim does, I think this would be really good with something like, there's a company called gapingvoid.com, and they build these cultural walls because they use what's called semiotic management or science. I didn't even know what semiotic was, but I did recently speak to the owner, how they build these cultural walls and how these symbols relay things to him. Because I was telling him, you know, in South Africa, that's something that, you know, we certainly do tribally. When people like do something wrong, you circle them and tell them all the good they do, not the bad. Right. So they always lead with that, although they just made a mistake. So we were talking about that and how he builds these cultural walls and help people to realize different ways of symbolizing their interaction with the external world within an
so
organization.
And so does he believe that these walls that he's helping build are some of them specific to a group of what they're actually experiencing, or are they all kind of like generic examples of cultural walls that you're likely to encounter? How's that?
No, they're very specific. Like if you go to their site, you set up an appointment and they, I guess meet with the principals and different people who are trying to change the culture. And
Okay.
so, because I've seen people even use some of these cultural wall kinds of things, like the art in it, in their emails. That's how I contacted the company originally. I said, "Who designs these? I'll be interested in doing this for healthcare when we're trying to get patients to change their health." And so
Interesting.
that's why why I was fascinated by this semiotic management systems or science as they call it. But they
Yes,
design
send
like
me a
these
little,
poster sized things.
yeah, email me a note about that because I've heard about semiotics. I've looked into it slightly. Maybe it's something we can take a closer look at as the circle.
Okay, definitely.
Um, okay, anyway, there's all these fallacies here. We could have a lot of fun going through them. Oh, here's a good one. Just a second. I love this one. Couldn't possibly be because I think it's actually happening. Although I wonder if how many of these aren't actually happening right now. The Texas sharpshooter. This is cherry picking data clusters to suit an argument or finding a pattern to fit a presumption. This false cause fallacy is coined after a marksman shooting at barns and then painting a bullseye target around the spot where the most bullet holes appear.
That's hysterical.
Clusters naturally appear by chance and don't necessarily indicate causation. So a little fun thing, the makers of sugarette candy drinks point to research showing that of the 5 countries where sugarette drinks sell the most units, 3 of them are in the top 10 healthiest countries on earth. Therefore, sugarette drinks are healthy.
Wow.
Wow. There you go. Oh, and I did find this one because I often do this one. You know how I've told you guys about common ground? One of the things that we learned in our common ground training was that common ground is not necessarily a middle ground. And so what they mean by that is this one over here. So saying that a compromise or middle point between 2 extremes must be the truth. So two belief systems, blah, 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 we say like, no, they're both extreme, they're equally wrong, therefore only the middle would be where we'd find that truth. So much of the time the truth does indeed lie between 2 extreme points, but this can bias our thinking. Sometimes a thing is simply untrue and a compromise of it is also untrue. Halfway between truth and a lie is still a lie.
Mm.
Holly said that vaccinations caused autism in children, but her scientifically well-read friend Caleb said that this claim had been debunked and proven false. Their friend Alice offered a compromise that vaccinations cause some autism.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
maybe, but that's not what the middle doesn't necessarily. Common ground was not looking for the middle point between 2 people of opposing viewpoints. It only said, let's begin by chatting about the things we agree about, the things that are in common to us. And once you've been able to establish that by and large, you share a great deal of commonality, now you can look at whatever the imbalance is really all about. And even now that we look at those imbalances, the answer is still not in the middle. It may very well be that these people, now that they realize they have so much in common, are able to hear the other person's position. And similarly, they're able to offer their position. And as a result, the negotiation, if you will, can begin. So, and that negotiation does not necessarily end up in the middle. It can end up favoring one or the other, but, or maybe the evidence that one has is far more compelling or whatever than the other one was putting forth. And so it ends up leaning off center. Thoughts about
So
that?
it seeks to create some kind of net value, right? So net value is not about popular decision. It's the one that creates the greatest good for the greatest amount of people. So I wonder, is that the
I would,
challenge of equality?
well, it could really be, but I would say that's something different than what Common Ground was really looking for. Common Ground was really just an attempt to diffuse unnecessary, counterproductive emotions that would vanish if you stop framing the other person as someone with whom you have nothing in common.
Yeah, yeah. See, I think that's the challenge of equality. I remember in medical school, I did a medical missions trip to Mother Teresa's Sisters of Charity, and I was watching this video of her being berated by a reporter, and they were berating her because she would not go to an anti-violence rally. And Mother Teresa, you know, is a tiny lady. She always says, my dear. She said, my dear, I won't go to that rally because you have two opposing sides who demonstrate exactly what they say they're against.
You're right.
She said,
Exactly.
she said, should you have a rally for peace, I will be there.
Very good, very good, very good. And you're not going to find peace until you find what that common ground is really all about. You know, and I think if people did that, maybe some of the atrocities we see committed domestically and around the world might not happen if people had just said, wait, let's agree upon a few things first.
Right.
Like, I'll never understand bombing schools and hospitals. I'll never.
Right.
You know, so anywho, this is their handout again on logical fallacies. And I thought if you guys want to either look at it as a bit of, pardon me, homework or whatever, or we can work our way through them. Obviously, they're funny enough to kind of do that, but they have a deck of cards available here as well. So Tim, I'm just kind of wondering, is this a tool that you might want to incorporate into the work that you're doing? Anyone else who's doing things where people are at odds with one another?
Well, we certainly talk about some of the various types of biases that
Yeah.
exist in the workplace and how that runs interference in creating inclusive work cultures.
Yeah.
So
Now, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, and Tim, you probably, you know, are our resident authority on this, but when I think of biases, I think of things that are blinding me personally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When I think of logical fallacies, I think that it's more something that I'm doing externally. Like, I can get that when it comes to these fallacies, people fall into habits where they just start to commit their favorites on a, you know, frequent basis, and others they've never even thought about using in their arguments. So I get that part of it might just be that we've gotten into the pattern of using logical fallacies. And at that point, if they also become fallacies that I am applying in my internal decision making, well, then I'm in trouble. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I would love to hear Tim's thought on that. I remember a psychologist, social psychologist, said, I think the term she used was situational blindness. And a lot of times, situational blindness, she said, if you turn those letters around, it turns to BS, which is blame shifting. But she was explaining that
BS
because
stands for.
Yeah.
I have always wondered that.
But her point was she was making was they're both the product of what happens with biases and how they're utilized internally, and how we can symbolize in the most you know, inappropriate way our interactions with things that are external. So she talked about that situational blindness. And they showed examples of this actually when you're given a directive, and just like the gambling example, they'll, you know, show videos of like people passing a ball to each other in a circle, and they say, "You want you to count how many times the ball is passed." And so people are fixated on that somehow they don't see a man in a bunny suit crossing the middle of the court.
Oh,
so
right.
after
Yep.
they'll ask about, hey, did you guys see the man crossing? And not many will see it. A very low percentage will see it.
And so the thought there is this is all about the biases that people have are affecting what they
because
think,
it
what they
blinds
notice,
us to
what they
really
value.
see Because, I think Kathy talked about this before when we say how we're losing the capacity to connect and reflect. And so much of what's needed to be present and present seeing and practicing present seeing is needed. You need a full view. You can't do it effectively with biases. So it
Okay.
blinds us in many ways.
Yeah, right, Brian. And we've used that clip, and there's another one that we've used also, and it's just interesting to your point, how many folks miss the bunny. And the thing about that exercise is that the instructions also contributes to that blindness, because participants are asked to count how many times that ball is passed around the circle. And so when folks are concentrating on that, then when the character comes in the suit, they just miss it. And yeah. So it does. There are certainly ways we demonstrate how it blinds us, and then when it becomes a part of how we see the world, we just, even if you bring it to our awareness, we sometimes will dismiss that.
Interesting. Okay, well, all right. So we saw the biases, we saw the fallacies poster, then we can get into creative thinking. This is much more complex. It isn't, it just has a different vibe to it. So let me go ahead and zoom in on this. So
this is my stuff right here. I love this.
What's that now?
The creative thinking.
Right. And so this is saying that as far as generating ideas, shifting perspective, mental models, I think is kind of independent, provoking new thoughts, and doing this in groups. So I think they've got these 4 or 5 different categories that are of creative thinking tools that you can have some fun with. Now, one of the ones that one of the roles that I think the Change Grid has always served as a tool of provoking thought. And so I thought, well, this could be interesting to just kind of take a quick glance at this and see, does it in fact talk about something that would parallel what we're doing? So will it blend SWOT now? Create 4, ooh, SWOT now. Create 4 quadrants and list strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Strengths feels like what I hope to gain. Weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So I might actually be able to make that textual overlay. Anyway, SWOT analyses are usually used for strategic evaluation, but they can also be used to provoke new ideas. What if future news? Pretend you've already achieved success. What would the newspaper headline? All right, so these feel like fun little exercises that you could do with a client, you could do with yourself, you could do with a group of people, depending on where you are. Oh, perspective shifts. When I was looking at this, I thought a lot of this feels like reframing. And so
exactly.
I particularly like the word extremify. So looking at extremes can bring insights into sharp relief. What would happen if you amplified the problem or solution? What if it was minuscule or all-consuming? What would a global response look like? So that's an interesting thing to shift the level at which that's just really changing the size of the frame, I guess. But I'm thinking recontext, that's also a reframe. Yeah, no limits. Yeah. Walking in other person's shoes. So it feels like something interesting to do. We've also, I think over the years, talked a lot about creating mind maps and that, and the mental models they've decided to share with us. I think we've talked about the Pareto principle. So first principles, define the base principles to reason more clearly. Question what's actually fundamental. Well, I guess we do that in ChangeWorks when we say, like, look, life boils down to tension management. So there's a few base principles we can look at, and maybe, just maybe, it'll bring some other things into sharper focus. Social proof. How do we create social buy-in, critical mass, a self-sustaining chain reaction? What can we do to create a viral effect? Scarcity, we value things that are in short supplies. There do we create demand or the perception of it? How might limitations be? And then the third story, consider the impartial perspective. So I think a lot of these actually fall into what was the thing we were reading back? This is almost a couple years ago. Noam Chomsky was talking about the different techniques that advertisers would use to manipulate the reader or whatever, the target of that. And I think a lot of these things would resonate with that as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I think this is a nice little tool for someone who wanted to create some exercises around this whole idea about thinking more creatively. One more I'll share with you. Have you guys, by the way, did you open up your folder? Did you already download it?
Yes, I did.
All right, I'm going to show you the rules of conversation. Now, this one I thought could be very useful from the perspective of providing coaching services to a client. So imagine for just a moment, intake has already been done. There's already been a change grid. You've already been able to help them circle which fallacies they tend to fall into when they don't have the real facts available to them, what biases they actually suffer from. So just assume all that's been done. Well, that's great. All that's been done. So now what? Well, I'm imagining you guys would like to turn that into some sort of an opportunity for you to be of service and to make some money in the process. And so a lot of these things that I was reading about and a lot of these activities that I was able to extract on my Google search, which I might show you that in just a couple of minutes, to me would not be useful so much as activities to put on a screening level change grid or a marketing level. These are not the kinds of questions or things I might want to bring up before we get to work. But once we get to work, a great deal of the things that I stumbled across were actually pieces of advice about how to fix a situation. Well, those pieces of advice about how to fix the situation would fall into the category of downgrade maneuvers. And if I'm going to do something that provokes someone's thinking and immediately give them the downgrade maneuver, what happened to my opportunity? Anybody? You all
Say
want
that again?
Okay, so let's say that I do something to provoke someone's thinking. Like, for example, I gave them the fallacies, I think was what it was. Maybe it was the biases, I don't remember. But no, those are the examples. It's the biases. So it's one thing for me to be able to say to someone, here's a bias that you have. Do you feel like you've got that bias? How do you think that these biases that you hold near and dear, these fallacies that you tend to report, these personality traits, blah, blah, blah. I could say to them, how do you think these are affecting your daily life? How do you think it'll affect your life moving forward? All right, so what I'm doing is I'm asking questions, I'm talking about activities, things that are designed to provoke someone's thinking, their awareness, build their level of tension to see if there is something that's troubling them sufficiently enough to reach out for some actual help. Well, if I read each one of these, some of them include advice you can do. So if you encounter someone who is using this framing effect, do this instead. So now, to me, that falls into the category of the kinds of advice or suggestions, recommendations I would provide to a client or help the client to realize on their own. So to me, that this is a different kind of a thing. Now, that being said, what do you think happens to tension if all we do is talk about how the biases, the fallacies, the whatever exist and what their impact is, and could be positive, could be negative, but I'm focusing on one line or another. So building the limitations of the consequences, et cetera. What's happening to someone's level of tension?
It's going up.
It's going up. What if I immediately, on the same document, in the next paragraph, say, and here's how to fix it?
Now
Tension
that
goes down.
Tension
Yeah.
goes down. What happens to your opportunity?
It flies out the window.
yeah,
It flies out the window. And so this is why I love that this material is here. But when we talk about how do we actually integrate this into the kind of work that we do, I can see how these sorts of documents, whether it's about creative thinking, because in all probability, each of us has perhaps a couple of these creative thinking tools that we kind of use all the time. But the rest of them, we might go like, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing. Oh, that's a good idea. Or, maybe we say, oh, it's been a long time since I've tried that. I guess what I'm saying is that when you give people all of these different options to think and feel and, present their case for something, people are not going to do all 24 of them or all however many you see here on the screen. They're going to default into a subset of whatever those biases, whatever those fallacies, whatever those tools happen to be. So what do? If I don't have the opportunity to let people become increasingly aware of the fact that there are patterns in their behavior that could be problematic, or that not really exploiting certain patterns is taking opportunities away from you. So one way or another, if I don't do something to kind of focus their thoughts, their feelings towards resolving an upgrade issue or taking advantage of an upgrade opportunity, I don't have an opportunity to engage them in conversation. I don't have an opportunity to be of service. But if their level of tension is high because they're excited about whatever it is that these outcomes could be, or troubled by whatever these outcomes could be, they're going to hit a threshold of activation sooner or later. How do I know they're at the threshold of activation about whatever ails them or whatever it excites them? What
they'll
might
do
they do?
something,
Well, they might do
or
something.
they might ask for some help.
They might ask for some help. And so they want to do the threshold of activation. I know I need to do something. I know what I need to do. I'm going to do it right now. If they're just shy of that, then they don't have, rather, then it'd still be north of that if we look at a change group. But nevertheless, they're still lacking in ability. They don't know what to do. So they're going to reach out. They're looking for that life ring, or whatever the case, may be based on the severity of their situation. Well, I can certainly say that from a coaching perspective, a developmental perspective, these are the kinds of things that I might want to pull into play to help this individual become more aware of a broader range of things they could do, or a way to address each one of these fallacies so they stop relying upon them. Because again, that paragraph here says that people pull these fallacies into action because they don't know what the truth really is. So maybe they should focus more on preparing themselves or really understanding what the truth actually looks like. So again, we tend to use fallacies in place of cogent logic. They're like tricks or illusions of thought, and they're often very sneakily used by politicians, the media, and others to fool people. Don't be fooled. So I like that it's positioning that as this is all happening to you, recognize it and defend yourself accordingly. But what I think they are missing here is that dodgy logic often occurs inside of your own head. So do you guys think that these fallacies are not used inside of your own thinking?
No, I think we all have that. We all
Yeah, yeah.
come to the world with these
And
notions.
maybe these things help us find life manageable,
Exactly.
So this is how we kind of self-medicate. But I like this idea that this is how we present. No, this is how we relate to the world around us, and whether that world is external or internal, we need to make sure that these fallacies are there. So if I said, well, based on what you've shared with me, you seem to have the following biases and deploy the following fallacies, and this could result in blah, 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 blah. you think they might have enough tension to go like, well, how do you fix me? How do we take care of this?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we
Yeah.
do it. Now, to add another level of complication, Shannon, this is headed your way. Do we have any reason to believe that certain biases and certain fallacies aren't more likely experienced by certain personality types, where other personality types may favor a different set of
Mhm.
biases and fallacies?
Absolutely.
If
Wow,
we believe
interesting.
that these have some mapability to personality, and we know that personality maps to the change grid, then the employment of these fallacies or the falling into these biases each have their own home on the change grid. Did I just
Interesting.
employ some fallacy and what I just said was nonsense? Or have I built a cogent case? So,
So, Shannon, can you give me an example of that? This is fascinating to me. I think I understand it, but I'm trying to, like, visually, I'm trying to put it together.
No, it makes perfect sense to me that it would, but that's also we're also living in a bubble of the change grid. So
well,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that's exactly right.
Exactly.
But
Do you think
basically we
most
know
of these
based on,
fall into the danger zones?
I think some of them could, but like, let's look at the gambler's fallacy, that if something has happened frequently enough, it's likely to happen, or it's likely to suddenly change, whatever the case may be. I would think that the gambler's fallacy contains more, what do you think, upgrade or downgrade energy?
Upgrade.
Upgrade,
Upgrade and more outgrid or ingrid energy?
outgrid.
Out.
Outgrid.
Outgrid. So we go like gambler's fallacy is probably something we would encounter in someone who is a bit up and a bit out on the change grid. Precisely where, I don't know, we'd have to do a deeper dive. But I think that that's something that could go there. If I think about appeal to emotion, let me zoom in for just a second. Oh, I don't like the way the new PDF reader handles zooming in. I want to click on what I'm looking at. Anyway, manipulating an emotional response in place of a valid or compelling argument. Appeals to emotion include appeals to fear, envy, hatred, pity, guilt, and more. Though a valid and reasoned argument may sometimes have an emotional aspect, one must be careful that emotion doesn't obscure or replace reason. Okay, so when they say appeal to emotion, and I'm doing this to impact other people, the question becomes, where does moving them into this emotional state put them on the change grid? And I guess the
Upgrade.
answer would be,
in
what do you
stress,
think?
in stress.
Upgrade. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to say, yeah, I would believe the majority of the time you guys are absolutely right, but I think it depends on which emotion I'm trying to awaken.
Mm.
Because what if I'm awakening apathy or telling you to, go calm down, don't worry about it, chill about this, nothing's going to happen, blah, blah, blah. That emotion of complacency, ambivalence, emotion moves you downgrade. But I think you guys are absolutely right. More often than not, it's going to be awakening that fear. What do they say up here? Fear, envy, hatred. I don't believe hatred exists upgrid. I think hatred is outgrid. So this may very well, to David's point, be a danger zone. Or the danger zone could be where you end up if this isn't done gently. Because again, we do say that awakening emotions is a very powerful upgrid maneuver, but we're not trying to blow people through the roof. We just want to get them to feel some engagement, some connection, whatever it is that's being talked about.
Yeah, I can see how these can go into the danger zones quite quickly, because it seems like even today, as I look at leadership per se, and I have this conversation with young people all the time, it seems like we're normalizing a brand of leadership where the crazier and the more extreme you are, that's the kind of leadership we're
Yeah,
electing, we're
yeah.
putting in place, and that to me is dangerous.
It's very dangerous, but I'll bet it's because certain people hold certain biases that resonate with whatever it is that's being put forth. And for them, it's a very connecting kind of an experience, which probably in and of itself is its own bias, because it's probably confirmation. We tend to agree with things that tend to agree with us. So if
Yeah.
it supports my argument, then it's inherently correct.
And the other parts of this from that I see is Dr. Gabor Mate just wrote a book called The Myth of Normal. Now, his work as an MD, he deals with trauma. And so, you know, his parents were Auschwitz survivors. And so he talked about how our body, how we metabolize trauma and these biases that we have. And that's what's scary to me when I think and look at these leadership crises that are all
Well,
around the world.
and so it makes you wonder, are what we are noticing about whoever the perpetrator happens to be, because now, of course, there's gazillions of them scattered across the planet. But one of these extremists, the question becomes, are they doing this in a calculated, intentional, dissociated way? So it's a technique they're applying? Because I could certainly say to you, when it comes to these biases and fallacies, if I was a trial attorney, I might want to know every single one of these because it could prove to be an interesting ploy when I'm trying to persuade people. So I would need to become fully fluent in all of these. And I imagine this is a subset of all the fallacies that have been identified. Yeah. So am I doing it deliberately? If I'm doing it deliberately, then I have to be somewhere on the change grid to pull it off.
Yeah.
You know, I can't be up grid and do this manipulation of a situation based on logical fallacies unless I'm where on the change grid.
Or downgrade.
I need to be right. I got to know my stuff. So abilities got to be north of half for sure. And I need to be paying very close attention to know which one to use when and what I should be sharing, because each one of these, I'm sure, has its own pattern, and there's stuff in that pattern that is standard and places where variables change. So like the appeal to nature, that's got, I feel like that just without even reading it, there has to be some sort of structure in the way such a fallacy is deployed. So if I'm doing that in a very calculated way, well, then I have to be, I believe, an analytical driver. So definitely driver, I'm trying to make something happen. Analytical, because I got to pay attention to stuff and, you know my stuff pretty well. But the question becomes, where are they moving you as a result of pulling these fallacies into play? You with
So
me?
they're moving upgrade.
Upgrade or downgrade.
Or downgrade,
Yeah.
or whatever it takes
Yeah.
to, I've got
Or
in
even,
case-
or even in-grid, if the choice is there to totally subjugate.
Right. It's all based on the scenario that I'm in, because let's say that I'm a defense attorney. We're doing a trial with a jury. I know more than anything else if I want to win. So forget who's right or wrong, whatever. Bottom line is I win. I want to win. It's all based on how I connect with the jury. And in addition to whatever information I can actually share. Because how often do you think in a trial case that it is so open and closed, open, shut, that what is the point of even having the trial? It's so obvious. The reason why there's a trial is because there's still question marks, or we want to create question marks, the possibility of question marks, because what's the standard of proof in a jury trial? It's all based on having not just a preponderance of the evidence, but you have to have facts that rule beyond the shadow of a reasonable doubt. You with me on that? So I would believe that.
About reason.
Go right ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, it is about reasonable doubt. So they spend all of their time manipulating and uncovering facts and arguments that will enable reasonable doubt if you're a defense attorney anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And
Right.
so why do I think this is their playbook, or part of their playbook? Right here, you got to know this stuff. Okay,
Well,
anyway.
it shouldn't be, and frankly, the reason they have trials, more specifically, is to find out if a law's been broken. Because I can tell you that Michelle's been she's been a lawyer for 25 years, a litigator, and she would use none of this.
Well, I imagine not. But is she involved in the hearing levels too? Because I think if you're
Yeah.
talking about hearing,
Oh, she does trials. Absolutely.
with a jury present.
Yeah.
Oh, well then the fact that she uses none of these is, good for her. Does she recognize when her opposing counsel is using these?
Well, I'm not so sure burden of proof. I don't know what that fallacy is, but the approach is to, know the law and show a true break of the law.
Interesting. Yeah, well, let's put that one as our final little comment for the day. Let's zoom in here. I'm curious to now know, what do they mean by burden of proof? Okay, no, stop sliding away. No, don't help me. Oh,
It's nice to see the stock market up.
it is, because it had dropped quite a bit. Okay, burden of proof. Can't I just zoom in like this? Oh, so much easier. Burden of proof. Saying that the burden of proof lies not with the person making the claim, but with someone else to disprove. The burden of proof lies with someone who is making a claim and is not upon anyone else to disprove. The inability or disinclination to disprove a claim does not make it valid. However, we must always go by the best available evidence. Okay, Bertrand declares that a teapot is, at this very moment, in orbit around the sun between Earth and Mars, and that because no one can prove him wrong, his claim is therefore a valid one. All righty then. Okay, there you go. So yeah, I thought what we might do is give some thought to what I've shared with you today. If you guys think this might be an interesting exercise, we could certainly play with it in a bit more detail, how it might relate to the change grid, overlay on the change grid. I'm not anticipating a strict coverage with every spot covered, because I don't know how they went about choosing the 24 they chose. But anyway, if you think that might be an interesting exercise and help you understand the change grid in even greater depth, I'm certainly willing to do that. I'm also willing to talk about how you might want to integrate this into coaching work or any kind of work you might be doing with the client in your role as a trainer or a consultant. So we can do that. So otherwise, I'm going to have a new subject for you come Thursday.
I like this, T, and I like the way that you related it to, the analytical driver
Yeah,
to implement, some of these various fallacies and biases and things like that. I think that could be very useful for coaching.
I think so. I think so as well. So maybe we'll talk a little bit more about this on Thursday, and I'll introduce the new subject on next Tuesday. Okay. All right. With that, thanks everyone so much for joining in. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.